Joining us in studio, Professor Sipho Siepe, political analyst, and Oliver Dixon, political or social-political analyst and commentator. Good evening, gentlemen, to both of you. Thanks so much for joining us. It's not necessarily a knee-jerk reaction, but I think there is a level of reluctance when it comes to members who find themselves on the wrong side of the party line, having to either concede, retract or apologize. Does it seem sincere to you? We'll start with you, Mr. Dixon.
You know, I think we need to get to a point in South African politics where we are able to honestly evaluate the sincerity of any apology. You know, when we found out that Helen Zille was asked repeatedly by Mane to apologize for the racist comments that she made about denying the atrocities of colonialism, we thought we don't want that apology because it's insincere. She was asked to have to do it. I think the same thing is happening here in this instance. He's being asked to do it. The same will happen with, with Edward in this instance. The same will happen with Makosi Khoza. Those apologies are never going to be sincere. So we then have to ask ourselves, importantly, what value do those apologies hold and how do we have to evaluate them? Those apologies only, the call for those apologies only exists because something was said before that. Why was the thing said that was said and what's the importance thereof? So Edward in this instance is saying that Pravin Gordhan is a sellout, right? We need to objectively evaluate that statement for its true weight. I think the problem in South African politics, and I've said this to you many times before, is that we suffocate democratic debate by hiding behind procedures and you know, party politics and saying that no, there are procedures and structures in the party that you must follow to make these sort of claims. I think if we make these claims in public and we're able to disseminate and evaluate these things in public, we have a stronger democratic debate.
Exactly. And I mean, the credibility issue in terms of trusting the process itself, if there's going to be a disciplinary action instituted, surely you would have the voice of the offended or those that feel defamed. And I don't know if Edward Zuma had gone that far to apologize to his fellow comrades, Professor Siep.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on where he left off before I come to you. The whole notion of suppression of a different point of view and them being suppressed through procedures, through rules, when in fact there might be something bigger that the people are actually trying to raise. And we should be very careful that we don't end up undermining that part of a democratic debate. That's number one. Then the second thing that the matter of Edward Zuma raises is an issue of how do we engage each other intelligently? Because what you see here is a level of frustration where people, instead of making their case, they resort to shorthand, and that shorthand tends to be more about insults. So if somebody says somebody is a sellout, it may appear to, given our history, it's a form of insult, but there might be a statement that the person is saying that when we talk about sellouts, this is the behavior of the people who call sellout. The question is, are these people really sellouts? So what we have is that we are saying, can we have a disagreement without using offensive language? So for me, it is a frustration that the members of the ANC have with themselves.
Yeah, let's get back to the point of in terms of making right or atone with his colleagues, or rather comrades.
Yeah, I would see my concern here, and I think it's also probably an appeal. I'm glad that the ANC has come in to say this is not acceptable language to a comrade. But he should not apologize only to the ANC. He should also apologize to those people he had offended. Because if the ANC find that to be offensive, it is also possible, likely that the people themselves will also feel that they've been insulted.
I genuinely don't think Pravin Gordhan cares who calls him what at this stage, and I don't think he even wants an apology. Yeah. Look, it's the right thing for Edwin to do, to step up and say, hey, look, I publicly defamed you and I publicly apologize to you. Yeah. That's obviously the right thing to do, but at this stage, no one really cares because there are more substantive issues to really care about. So I think if we're going to fixate ourselves in South African politics on apologies and tone and those things, we lose the debate.
Yes. And I think, as you're rightfully saying, that it's questionable anyway as to when the apology comes. You can even think back of President Jacob Zuma having to apologize for what he may have omitted about the whole Nkandla debacle.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, and Helen Zille, as you have cited. Professor Hanyane, good evening. Good evening to you and welcome. Professor Perry Hanyane is a political analyst and a professor with the University of the Northwest. The art of apologizing, though, it's not something that comes very easy. I mean, you have to be hard-pressed. Just human nature, not wanting to account or atone for your sins.
Good evening, Cindy, and good evening to my colleagues there who have articulated this quite succinctly and very well. I wouldn't like to spoil their contributions at this point in time. But let me add my 2 cents worth of opinion on this issue. I think we're beginning to learn that, for once, the veil of secrecy when issues such as these are aired in public in the name of apology tend to be stretched extremely. And secondly, that it invokes senses of public civility. Earlier on in your presentation, you spoke about issues of credibility, and I think this is where the issue of credibility is positioned. Sadly, it's an issue that begins then to put to test whether boundaries of impunity can be stretched, and if so, to what level can they be stretched? I'm also sensing here, as you rightly put it yourself earlier, that it does, in a sense, invite public empathy and not necessarily sympathy, as in when these issues are raised in public, which in turn are aimed to shape certain political transactions. It's quite interesting that you also draw in the Nkandla apology into the matter. And I find it quite interesting that it was quick when Zuma Senior, the president, actually gave a somewhat termed national apology, that no sooner than later some measure of understanding was given. But here we are, we seated with the son, whose apology is subject to question, analysis, and examination, and rightly so. It is indeed, it should be subject to that as well.
All right, let's get a Professor Sipho, go ahead.
But I still think you have one point that we must not lose. If you take the apology of Helen Zille, it was, for me, politically expedient.
Yeah.
And because I don't think Helen Zille was given an opportunity to explain herself that she honestly believes in what you are saying. Instead, she was told that what you are doing, you are undermining the party and you are bringing a party into disrepute. But the substance of her argument was never disproved to be incorrect or correct. It may have offended people, but if it's an intellectual posture that she takes in terms of her own understanding, the approach was to suppress that, and the discussion did not take place. Yeah. So the point that she believes, and there are many people who are also scholars, and she could actually quote a number of even black scholars who agree with her. So the issue was left there, that you don't say this. It's almost like we are policing a particular thought instead of engaging it. Now there comes also Edward Zuma. He raises an issue that in the past, when you say that, it's a shorthand that most people will understand that this is a people who have betrayed what they stand for. So then when he apologizes, does it mean these people have not betrayed the cause that he is the point that he's trying to make? So those are the issues. But what I'm also saying is that we should apology should not be. It should be about maybe the offense in terms of the language, not the message that the person is trying to say. Because what we have done here, when you apologize, you are now taking away the idea that was putting across, that you have a people here who are working with us, but now they have jumped, they are on the other side. That's a statement that is made, that they are now working with the enemy.
I see.
So the question is, when you apologize, are you saying they are no longer working with the enemy, which is what sellouts were actually doing? So I think there must be an apology to what may be offensive rather than to the idea that he was trying to put across.
No, I get your point, but I mean, it's also worth noting that with the upcoming elective conference, that the ANC somehow now needs to rein in members and take some control in terms of how members conduct themselves.
Certainly. And you know, again, that Helen Zille's apology was politically expedient. It was about timing. It was about damage control. And a lot of apologies of this nature are going to happen. Here's a number of apologies we're going to receive in the coming months. Cyril Ramaphosa is finally going to apologize for what happened in Marikana. He may take some responsibility for that. Julius Malema may finally, hopefully, apologize for what happened in Limpopo under his time as ANC Youth League president. We may even get an apology from various other parties for taking responsibility for something, because what's going to happen is there's going to be an appeal to the consciousness of the people. There's going to be an appeal to the softer side of rationalizing political decisions in this country. And we're going to see a lot of those. The question that we're going to have to continuously ask ourselves: is that apology real, or is that apology just for a political expedience and all of these things? And even then, we then have to really force ourselves to have the substantive debate. Yeah. We have to really force ourselves. If we do, for instance, hypothetically get a Cyril Ramaphosa apology for a lot of what happened in Marikana, is that apology going to come with an explanation for exactly what he did wrong, why he did what he did, and what he should have done different, and how can we fix that going forward? Because if an apology doesn't come with any of those substantive arguments, then that apology is no apology at all.
Actually, this is why the unions and the workers in Marikana rejected that apology, because they're saying, why did it take some people elsewhere who were far away from the scene of the crime to force that apology? And why does it come 5 years later? Could it be because you are now running for presidency, and then these other issues will be looked at? So the nature of those apologies needs to be subjected to why did you wait? The same applies to the former protector with her son using a car. She later, after a number of years, decided to say, I'll do the right thing. My conscience suggests this. But the question is, where was your conscience all along when you were making this demand to other people? Yeah.
Let's now test why Edward Zuma would apologize if he firmly believes in his statement. Professor Perry Hanyane, if it's not really just buckling under pressure, and secondly, depending on what is at stake in the elective conference, especially with the name he carries.
I think not only that, but the proximity that he enjoys, not only as a son of the president, but also closer to one of the more powerful branches of the ANC in the country, and that is in KZN, may very well have pulled some strings here in persuading him to actually come out and apologize. And one of the things that I think the three of us in this debate argue about is that not always is common sense the key to drive as and when public apologies are given. And so is the case in this instance, I believe.
And do you think he sort of got off easy because he's the president? And what?
No, I don't buy that. You know why? I remember Kibima Patwe was faced with the same thing. And he was asked to apologize, even the people that he had offended. And they said, if you don't apologize and you don't retract, we'll go to court. So that is always the first approach, to say, to what extent are you willing to see the error of your ways? And then you have people appealing, and then they pull you. But if you become stubborn, then people go to the next level. And I think it's always the nature of things to say, what you've said offends me. And if you're not willing to see that I'm offended, then I'm also going to take certain steps. I think it's always the first part of engaging with that which is seen as an offense.
Yeah,
but the point that we're also trying to raise here is, for me, how do we disagree with each other without being disagreeable? And how do we look at the disagreement as opposed to the shorthands that come as insults, which I think that, for me, insults do not help us to go to the next level, because we often tend to respond with insults to insults. Yeah. But I would like to say, what are the issues that are being raised, so that we don't use approaches to suppress what could be an important debate.
And I think that the opportunity is lost there, because I think the matter has now effectively been closed. But the application of discipline as well, I mean, the strongest we've seen is against Dr. Makhosi Khoza, almost similar to what Julius Malema at that time was complaining about, that it tends to be too harsh or maybe not necessarily fair. If you look at the Western Cape Marius Fransman and how he's been critical of the consistency and how disciplinary action has been applied within the ANC, you think in this case it was the right approach to just accept the apology and let it go?
I think oftentimes disciplinary processes and procedures often only get initiated depending on the direction of your dissent, right? So, for instance, if Marius Fransman said something, slightly controversial about another PEC member, that's someone's going to let that slide. But if it's going to take center stage in media coverage, it deserves it gets more attention, and then often that results in it getting more attention in terms of disciplinary action. The proportionality of these actions often get adjudicated based on the constitutional makeup of the organization. That's to say, Makhosi Khoza has the complete right to go through the provincial disciplinary action that she's going through in KZN. If she's unhappy with the outcome, she can take it to national level. If she's unhappy with it at national level, that's to say, if she thinks that even the national disciplinary committee had failed in the application of the party's constitution, she may take it to the High Court and it gets adjudicated there, right? So I think we'll always get proportional action to disciplinary to ill discipline within organizations of this level.
Yeah, and it's not the same transgressions, I suppose.
But
the merit would have to come.
An element that going back to the organizational constitution, where the reason why somebody like Pravin or Darana Hadakom, they've not been dealt with in the same way that Makhosi Khoza has been dealt with, is because they had made sure that in terms of their own constitution, these are matters that can be raised within the structures of the organization. And they continuously use that. So it will become difficult for the ANC to say we're a party that allows differences. And when people raise those differences inside, Joel Netende did exactly the same thing when he asked the president to step down in the NEC meeting. That's the right forum that the organization recognizes. But once you go out and you are also seen to be celebrated by those who are permanently and in terms of orientation opposed to your own organization, you are no longer assisting the organization. So what people see here is somebody who has said, I'm beyond you. And they could actually be correct to say they see somebody who anyway has decided to leave the organization and she doesn't care. You cannot belong to a party, to an organization, and then behave as if it has no rules. And what they're doing is is the application of those rules. Whether they are consistent, that's a matter that she can always appeal against, that here the treatment is unfair or is not consistent, and it can be a case that she can actually win.
Yeah, but Professor Hanyane, how much of this has to do with the upcoming vote of no confidence in Parley next Tuesday, in your view?
Well, I think it does have a bearing of sorts, but in my humble opinion, I think it also expresses the kind of divisions that exist within the party. Quite rightly, there is a public opinion around the whole issues of disciplines, as it were, in the ANC. The feeling, on the one hand, is that some people can get free from some measure of disciplining being applied to them, and others can rather face the music, if you want to call it that way. So yes, it reflects the bigger picture, and one of them is quite rightly the tensions that exist towards the December elective conference.
All right, thanks so much, Professor Hanyane. Just looking at, I almost called him Executive Mayor, Mondi Gungubele, was somebody who's hugely respected in the branches and structures of the party, has never really stepped out of line, and, came back and humbled himself and took the advice not to speak publicly or criticize the party. And, we've heard the party also reinforcing that political line when it comes to the no confidence vote. Do you think this is also one of those mechanisms to say, by the way, this is how we expect you to behave come next Tuesday?
Look, a lot of people raise issues within the ANC. Not everybody's issue, and in any political party for that matter. We can look at the DA and Mbali Ntuli's complaint against Helen Zille, how the disciplinary procedures went there. But people in organizations, specifically political organizations, often raise these issues. But depending on your respectability and stature in the organization, your complaint may not get to the top as quickly as the next person's complaint, or it may not get the same level of attention and that sort of thing. So oftentimes people who step out of the norm, who step out of the chambers of the party to make their voices heard, to sort of do what Makosi Khoza has done, are people whose voices have been suffocated within the party, whose debate has been shut down. But obviously the party wants people who are going to say, we'll vote in favor of President Jacob Zuma, because they have to toe the party line. That's what parties and caucuses do. That's literally the definition of a caucus, right? So it's about regrouping your people to let them vote in the right direction, in the direction your party deems to be the correct direction. So the party is fairly okay in having to do that, but I think Makosi Khoza and politicians alike also have cause to be able to step out of party line if the democratic debate voice in that party is being suffocated.
Okay, point taken. Much appreciated. Professor Siepe, don't give me that look. We're out of time. We'll pick it up at another occasion. But that's Professor Sipho Siepe, political analyst. Professor Peri Hanyane is a professor with the University of the Northwest and a political commentator. And Oliver Dixon is a social political analyst. You at home, thanks indeed for watching. We're back after this.